Well, welcome to Dirty Secrets, the channel where the truth can't stay hidden. Affairs don't always start in bars or on dating apps. They don't always begin with strangers in dimly lit corners or reckless swipes on a screen. Sometimes, they start in the most ordinary of places, the office, a place where people spend more hours with their coworkers than with their own families. A place where late meetings become routine, where business trips blur the line between work and intimacy, where success is praised and temptation is quietly excused. And that's what makes workplace affairs so dangerous, because they grow in plain sight, behind the shield of professionalism, trust, and responsibility. Tonight's story is about Jenna, a woman who thought her husband had finally found his dream job, a job that promised stability, security, and the kind of future they'd always talked about. But that job came with something Jenna could never have predicted. A boss who didn't just give her husband promotions, she gave him attention. Attention he couldn't resist. And in the end, it wasn't just a job that changed their lives. It was the affair that destroyed their marriage and nearly destroyed Jenna's sense of self. Jenna and Eric had been together for 10 years. They weren't a flashy couple. They didn't live in a mansion or drive luxury cars. But they had something far more valuable: stability. Their life together was built on little things: a cozy 3-bedroom home in a safe neighborhood, 2 kids, one in elementary school, the other still in preschool, weekend family trips to the park, movie nights with popcorn and pajamas, the kind of everyday happiness that people often overlook until it's gone. Money had always been tight, though. Eric worked hard, but his previous jobs never paid enough to cover everything comfortably. Jenna worked part-time, balancing her schedule so she could spend more time with the children. They managed, but every bill felt like a reminder of what they didn't have. So when Eric landed a high-paying job at a prestigious company, it felt like a miracle. A chance to breathe. A chance to stop worrying every time the car made a strange sound, or when the kids outgrew their clothes faster than they could afford replacements. Jenna was thrilled, proud, relieved. At first, Eric seemed happier too. He came home energized, talking about new projects, about the recognition he was finally getting. And at the center of all those stories was his new boss, Victoria. Victoria was powerful, confident, and charismatic. She praised his work, pushed him into opportunities, and gave him responsibilities that others in the office could only dream of. Eric described her as tough but fair, the kind of leader who demanded the best but also rewarded it. At first, Jenna admired her from a distance. She thought, if Victoria sees potential in Eric, then maybe this really is his big break. But as the weeks turned into months, the stories about Victoria became more frequent. The dinners, the late nights, the trips, always Victoria. And though Jenna didn't realize it yet, her trust was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. At first, Jenna didn't question the changes. Big jobs came with big responsibilities, right? Long hours, late nights, endless deadlines. That was part of the package. Eric would come home later and later, his tie loosened, his eyes tired. He always had the same explanation. Victoria needed me to finish a project. Victoria asked me to stay and prep for a client. Victoria said the team couldn't move forward without me. And every time Jenna nodded, she wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. But trust has a way of fraying, not in one clean cut, but in little tears that spread until the whole fabric unravels. One night, as Jenna was loading the dishwasher, Eric's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, expecting a reminder or a message from a colleague. Instead, she saw Victoria's name light up the screen. 10:47 p.m. on a weeknight. Eric walked in just as she noticed, quickly grabbing the phone and answering in another room. His voice was low, muffled, almost conspiratorial. When he returned, Jenna raised an eyebrow. Victoria, at this hour? Eric didn't miss a beat. She's demanding, always pushing. You know how bosses are. Jenna forced a smile, but her stomach churned. Another time, Jenna called Eric while he was at a client dinner. The restaurant was noisy in the background, but what froze her was the sharp, distinct sound of a woman's laughter. It wasn't casual. It was the kind of laughter that carried familiarity, intimacy. Before she could say anything, Eric cut the call short. Later, when she asked, he brushed it off. "You're being paranoid. She's my boss. That's it." But paranoia has a reason. Her gut screamed that this wasn't just work. Then came the trips. At first, they were sold as opportunities. Conferences, client meetings, overnight stays to close deals. But Jenna noticed a pattern. Every trip seemed to include Victoria. No other team members, just the two of them. Eric explained it away. "She trusts me more than the others. It's a compliment." But Jenna couldn't shake the image of her husband, alone with his glamorous boss in a hotel across the country. Back at home, Eric began to change in small but noticeable ways. He bought new cologne. When Jenna asked why, he said he wanted to feel more professional. He started hitting the gym more often, saying he needed the stamina to keep up with the demands of his new job. He guarded his phone like never before. Where he used to leave it on the nightstand, now he kept it face down, screen locked. When Jenna reached for it once, half joking about needing to check the time, Eric snatched it back too quickly. "Work emails," he said, "confidential." It was a small excuse, but it spoke volumes. At home, the intimacy began to fade. Conversations felt shallow, distracted. Eric seemed present physically, but distant mentally, as if his mind was always somewhere else, or with someone else. Jenna tried to dismiss it. She told herself it was just stress, that he was under pressure, that it was the cost of success. But deep down, she knew. The late nights, the laughter through the phone, the trips, the cologne, the guarded phone. Her instincts whispered the truth she didn't want to face. Something wasn't right. The truth has a way of waiting. It lingers in shadows, hiding behind excuses and half smiles, until the moment it decides to reveal itself. For Jenna, that moment came on a Friday night. Eric had left that morning in a rush, kissing her quickly, barely making eye contact. He mumbled something about working late. "Victoria needs me to finish a big project before Monday." It wasn't unusual anymore. Jenna had almost grown numb to it. But that night she felt something shift inside her. A spark of defiance. She thought, if he's really working late, then he deserves a little kindness. A gesture. His favorite dinner, delivered with love. She ordered takeout from the Thai place he loved, packed it neatly into a bag, and told the kids she'd be back soon. She even rehearsed the smile she would give him when she walked into the office. Warm, supportive, the picture of a wife who believed in her husband. But behind that smile was something else. A question she had been too afraid to ask out loud. What if I'm right? When she arrived at the office, her heart skipped. The parking lot was nearly empty. Rows of cars sat in silence, their owners long gone for the weekend. Except one, Eric's car. Jenna's pulse quickened. She stepped inside, her heels echoing through the polished lobby. The building was quiet, too quiet. Most of the lights were off, casting long shadows across the floor. Only one light remained on, glowing faintly from the far end of the corridor. Victoria's office. Jenna's hands tightened around the bag of food. Her breath grew shallow as she walked toward the light, each step heavier, slower, as if her body already knew what her mind refused to accept. Victoria's office had a glass wall facing the corridor. As Jenna drew closer, she hesitated, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might give her away. And then she saw it. Through the glass, Eric was standing too close to Victoria. Their bodies leaned toward each other, papers scattered across the desk like an afterthought. Victoria's hand touched his arm. His hand slid around her waist. And then, without hesitation, he kissed her. Not a fleeting kiss, not an accident. A kiss that spoke of months of stolen moments, of passion that had been nurtured in secret. Jenna froze. The bag slipped slightly in her hand, the containers inside shifting with a dull thud. Her husband, her marriage, her life, shattered in an instant. She could have stormed in. She could have screamed, thrown the food at them, demanded answers. But she didn't. She stood there, hidden by the shadows, watching the truth unfold with her own eyes. The moment she had feared for months. The one she had tried to convince herself wasn't real was now undeniable. Tears blurred her vision. Her knees trembled. She felt as if the floor itself had given way beneath her. Finally, she turned and walked away, her breath ragged, her heart in pieces. The takeout bag swung limply at her side. Dinner for a man she no longer knew. That night, Jenna didn't cry in the car. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the takeout bag out the window. She drove home in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles turned white. Her chest felt hollow, her body running on instinct alone. The children were asleep when she returned, the house quiet, almost peaceful. But peace was gone. She set the takeout bag on the kitchen table, untouched, and sat in the dark. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't pour herself a drink. She simply waited. It was past midnight when Eric walked through the door. His tie was gone, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his cologne stronger than usual. He froze when he saw her sitting there, the bag of food still on the table, the silence pressing down on both of them. "Jenna," his voice cracked slightly. "What are you doing up?" Her voice was calm, too calm. "I saw you." He blinked, confusion flickering across his face. "Saw me? What do you mean?" Her eyes locked onto his, unblinking, unforgiving. With her. In her office. The color drained from Eric's face. His lips parted, searching for words, but none came. His body gave him away before his mouth could. Finally, he stammered, It just happened. It doesn't mean anything." Jenna laughed bitterly, a sound that didn't carry humor but pain. "It doesn't mean anything. You kissed her like it meant everything, like I don't even exist." Eric took a step forward, his hands raised as if to calm her. "Jenna, please. You don't understand. She pressured me. She's my boss. If I said no, it could have cost me my job." "Your job," Jenna repeated, her voice sharp. "So you're telling me our marriage, our family, our kids, all of that was worth less than your career?" Eric shook his head desperately. "No, that's not what I meant. I love you. I love the kids. I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," she shot back. "Over and over, every late night, every trip, every lie you told me while I was home raising your children." He moved closer, his voice breaking. "It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. But it doesn't have to end us. We can get through this." Jenna's eyes filled with tears, but her tone stayed steady. "Do you even hear yourself? You risked everything we built. You risked me. You risked being the father our kids need, just to feel wanted by her." Eric's shoulders slumped. His excuses were collapsing under the weight of her words. And in that silence, Jenna felt something inside her shift. The pain was still there, sharp and overwhelming, but beneath it was clarity. Because in that moment, she realized the truth. He had made his choice, and she had to make hers. The days that followed felt unreal, like Jenna was moving through someone else's life. Papers to sign, lawyers to call, family to inform, all while trying to hold herself together for the children, who had no idea why their world was suddenly splitting apart. Jenna filed for divorce within weeks. The decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Trust once broken, that deeply couldn't be rebuilt. Not when the betrayal had been so calculated, so prolonged. Eric begged. He pleaded in text messages, in late-night phone calls, even standing on the porch with flowers in his hands. But flowers don't erase the image of a husband in another woman's arms. He promised therapy. He promised to quit his job. He promised it had meant nothing. But every word felt hollow. Because if it truly had meant nothing, why had it cost Jenna everything? Explaining it to the kids was the hardest part. How do you tell a 6-year-old why daddy isn't living at home anymore? How do you explain betrayal to a child who still believes in superheroes and bedtime stories? Jenna tried to keep it gentle. She told them daddy made mistakes, but that he still loved them. She reassured them that none of it was their fault. But behind her calm words, her heart shattered again and again. At night, after tucking them into bed, she would sit in the hallway and cry silently, muffling the sound so they wouldn't hear. News spread quickly. Friends who had once admired their marriage were shocked. Some rallied around Jenna, bringing meals, offering babysitting, sending messages late at night just to say, "You're not alone." Others, though, disappeared, not because they didn't care, but because betrayal makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to look at their own lives, their own marriages, and wonder how fragile trust really is. Her parents were heartbroken. They had loved Eric like a son. Seeing Jenna suffer reopened old wounds they couldn't heal for her. Everywhere Jenna went, she felt eyes on her. At the grocery store, at school pickup, in the coffee shop. She imagined whispers. She didn't see it coming. With his boss? How humiliating. Poor Jenna. Everyone knew but her. And maybe that was the worst part. Not just the betrayal, but the humiliation of being the last to know. At night, the silence in her house was deafening. She lay in bed, staring at the empty space beside her, replaying every detail of their marriage. Every anniversary, every vacation, every time he had looked her in the eye and said, "I love you." Were they lies? Had it all been a performance? Or had she simply not been enough to keep him faithful? The questions ate away at her until sleep finally dragged her under, restless and heavy. Jenna had lost a husband. Her children had lost the family they once knew. And though friends and family tried to help, Jenna knew one thing for certain. The path forward would be hers to walk alone. Healing didn't happen overnight. It never does. For Jenna, the first weeks after the divorce felt like standing in the wreckage of a house after a fire. Everything looked familiar, but nothing felt safe. Every corner reminded her of what she'd lost. Every silence echoed with what Eric had done, but slowly, painfully slowly. She began to rebuild. The first step was therapy. Walking into that office the first time felt humiliating, as if admitting she was broken. But what she discovered was that therapy wasn't about weakness. It was about finding strength she didn't know she still had. She sat across from a stranger and spoke the words she had been too afraid to say out loud. "I don't know who I am without him. I feel like I wasn't enough." I can't stop replaying that night in my head. The therapist listened, asked questions, helped her untangle the knots of shame and grief that had twisted inside her. Session by session, Jenna began to see that Eric's betrayal wasn't about her worth. It was about his weakness, his choices, his inability to value what he had. Her closest friends became lifelines. They called late at night just to listen when she couldn't sleep. They showed up with coffee in the morning when she hadn't eaten. They reminded her that she wasn't alone, even when it felt like the entire world had abandoned her. And her children, though young, became her greatest source of strength. Their laughter, their hugs, their simple presence reminded her that her life still had meaning, that love still existed even if it came from a different place now. Jenna began to rediscover herself. She signed up for yoga classes. She started journaling every night, pouring her pain onto paper so it wouldn't poison her from the inside. She began running, at first only a block, then a mile, then longer. Each step felt like defiance, like she was outrunning the shadow of what had been done to her. And slowly, her reflection in the mirror changed. Not physically, though her posture grew stronger, her eyes brighter, but in the way she saw herself. She no longer saw a broken woman. She saw a survivor. One night, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, Jenna whispered a promise to herself. "I will never ignore my instincts again. I will never let someone else's lies define my worth. I will not let betrayal be the end of my story." It wasn't just words. It was a vow. And though the scars remained, she carried them with pride. Proof that she had walked through fire and survived. Workplaces are supposed to build careers. They're supposed to provide stability, opportunity, and a future. But sometimes, they destroy families. For Jenna, her husband's office affair was more than a betrayal. It was the unraveling of 10 years of marriage. It was the shattering of trust she thought was unbreakable. It was the humiliation of realizing that while she was building a home, raising their children, and holding their world together, he was risking everything with someone who cared only about power and attention. But here's the truth about betrayal. It doesn't define the betrayed. It defines the betrayer. Eric's weakness didn't mean Jenna wasn't strong. His disloyalty didn't mean she wasn't worthy. His choices didn't erase her value. Yes, Jenna lost a husband. Yes, her children lost the family they once knew. But what she gained was something far more powerful: clarity. She saw, finally, that her instincts had been right all along. She saw that her worth was never tied to his choices. She saw that survival wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. And slowly, through therapy, through friendship, through the simple act of waking up each morning and refusing to give up, Jenna discovered something she had forgotten: herself. The affair ended her marriage, but it also set her free. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't just close a chapter, it opens the door to a stronger, more independent life. And for anyone listening who has ever been betrayed by a spouse, by a friend, by someone you thought you could trust, remember this: their betrayal is not your identity. Their lies are not your story. Your strength is your story. And like Jenna, you can rise from the ashes of broken trust and write a life that is yours and yours alone.